Welcome to a new episode of TTG Conversations 5 Questions video series. I am Karen Yu, Group Editor of TTG Asia Media. This episode will discuss Singapore's possible endemic COVID future and what that means for the travel and tourism industry. And taking us through this topic is Arthur Kiong, CEO of Far East Hospitality. Arthur has been in the hospitality business for more than 3 decades. He joined Far East Hospitality in July 2012, and through his focus on joint ventures and acquisitions, the company's portfolio has expanded from just 18 properties in Singapore to 105 properties across 9 countries around the world at this point. Welcome to the show, Arthur.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Karen.
Good afternoon to you. I've got 5 questions, and here's the first, yeah? Singapore's COVID-19 Multi-Ministry Task Force has spoken much about the pandemic exit strategy since July, and we finally started to see signs of a 4-step transition last week, which grants more freedom to fully vaccinated Singaporeans as well as inbound travelers. Now, how do you interpret that for Singapore's travel and tourism business?
Well, speaking specifically for Singapore, I think we're in for a rather rough ride. There will be a period of maybe a quarter of buoyancy. Then after that, I think we're in for a rather tough time. And so I think this is not really, if you like, positive and sanguine news. And the reason why I think that we're in for a very difficult and long ride, and what we have to do has got to do with if you look at the numbers. In 2019, Singapore did 19 million visitors, and we have approximately inventory of 70,000 hotel rooms, approximately 425 hotels, that's licensed hotels, and the occupancy ran from 85 to 87%. And at 85 to 87%, the yield that a hotel property derives for an owner is between 2 to 3%, which is actually not very high. But owners can withstand a rather dismal yield of 2 to 3% for a while, because currently interest rates, or at least in 2019, interest rates were also very low. So that kinds of, you're able to get by. And so when will it be that Singapore do 19 million visitors again, considering our 5 top markets, which are China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Australia, are in a far lesser vaccination situation like ours, right? So if you look at these 5 countries, their vaccinations are nowhere close to the 70% that we have. But the question to ask is, how soon will they get the vaccination up? So China is at the forefront. China will possibly get to a 70% vaccination early next year. But China has a different political posture when it comes to COVID-19. And their posture is to maintain a zero-case scenario. So in order to maintain a zero-case scenario, they will continue with a 14-day quarantine for returning visitors. So who is going to travel outbound if you have to be quarantined for 14 days? The other countries, which are India, Indonesia, Malaysia, they have totally different set of problems. And their vaccination rate is going to be very uneven. And even if they manage to get their vaccination rates up higher, there are other problems that will be compounding the situation, such as the recognition of their vaccine certification, what their political posture will be at this point in time, and how readily can we come to agreement with the protocols pertaining to vaccination passports. Okay, so that's and of course Australia, which is very important to us. That's currently they are kind of in between wanting to have a zero case scenario right now and wanting to move to an endemic scenario. But you're looking at the soonest that they can reach an endemic scenario is sometime in the middle of next year. And so if you were to combine our 5 top markets not being able to produce inbound travelers of any significance, the 5 top markets contribute 40 to 50% of our total base of visitors. So that makes over the next few years, the question is whether we can even have half, or maybe close to 2/3 of this kind of a volume. And the answer right now is, I find it hard to imagine how you're going to even have half or 2/3 when your 5 top markets is not going to be producing anytime soon. So that's quite looming, right? Because the question then would be, how long can hotel owners sustain the situation. And next year is going to be much harder than this year. So a lot of people say, well, next year should be easier than this year. How can you say next year is going to be harder than this year? It's harder because the government of Singapore has been extremely generous in terms of their government isolation contracts. That at this point in time, there's over 90 hotels that's on government isolation contracts because they are shoring up the inventory as a contingency as they open up the markets. But at some point in time, the isolation contracts will cease from 90 to maybe 9. And the government has been also extremely generous in terms of their property tax rebates as well as their job support scheme, which has been tapering off. So next year, I don't suppose there's going to be any of that. So without all these support mechanisms being taken out, hotels will be left on their own with a dismal inbound market, which will then trigger rampant discounting. It has to somehow, right? Because, you know, the hotels' rooms are vacant, people become desperate, and then they start to discount. And where discount is concerned, it's going to be a race to the bottom. Meanwhile, Singapore is going to be tweaking its foreign labor policies, which means that to import foreign workers is going to be far more difficult, which means that the objective of the government is to establish a somewhat of a pseudo minimum wage or to introduce, you know, the progressive wage model is no longer good enough, and you're trying to raise the minimum wage of workers in all industries. Now, the hotel industry will say, can you give us a break? The other industries are all doing very well, so we start with them first. But the tourism industry and the aviation industry should perhaps have a bit of a breather. But the government can't do that, because once you have a one industry is not being acted on with a minimum wage and other industries are being imposed a minimum wage, there will be an outflow of workers anyway from the lower wage industries to the higher wage industry. So either way, it's not going to be beneficial. So you've got to implement minimum wage kind of consistently across all industries. So what I'm saying is, I think a lot of people do not view this seriously enough, but the next 12 months at least is going to be quite tumultuous, because you're going to have very little demand chasing a great deal of supply, which will trigger discounting, which will affect our cost models because of the constriction of labor. And the question then is, what would hotel owners do during this next 12 months, which will allow them to sustain in order to preserve their capability? So the hotel owner has got two choices. You bleed in order to preserve capability, or you conserve and if you like, close down and come back when times are better. So during this period where hotels will definitely bleed, what can hotels do meaningfully? Now, obviously, the government is saying you should use words like pivot and reimagine and digitize. But what exactly, and how meaningful can people afford to do that when you're bleeding cash? And the other thing that I think hotels need to do is to consolidate, meaning that we have to outsource and come together. So we are helping some hotels with back of house services, for example, to help them conserve their resources. And by helping others, we're helping ourselves, because then we truly enjoy economies of scale. So these are some of the measures that we are doing in the meantime, in anticipation for the next 12 or 18 very difficult months.
Yeah. Do you foresee Singapore hotels having to close down? Once that reality happens, the difficult times that you were predicting.
When we talk about a pivot and reimagination, and we talk about quality tourism, I want to just say, what does quality tourism mean, you see? What does the term quality tourism mean? And I would hypothesize that if you take a view through the lens of history, what was tourism to Singapore in the 1970s? tourism was very important to Singapore in the 1970s because Singapore tourism created a lot of jobs, for Singaporeans. So the question right now is, will tourism or will hospitality create the jobs for Singaporeans that Singaporeans want? That's the question. Will the hotel create jobs for Singaporeans and provide wages that Singaporeans want? Now, if the hotel does not provide jobs for Singaporeans, the majority, and it's got to be the vast majority, at wages that Singaporeans aspire, then you have to question, does that hotel have a right, or does it provide value to exist? So based on my answer, it is quite logical where this direction is going.
You have been quite vocal about the future of tourism, and one of the advices that you have been pushing is that destinations and industry players must do even better to provide compelling reasons for consumers to brave tedious procedures for a trip today. How different do you think destination positioning and tourism product creation must be post-pandemic? And between that ideal state and reality, where do you think Singapore stands?
Wow, that's a really big and meaty question, Karen. And I think wow, we have to break this down. We have to break this down a little bit because there's a lot to digest in that question you have. I think the first part of the question is that post-pandemic, there's already a lot of talk that business travel is going to be subservient to leisure travel, and that is because business can be done over platforms like this, and that leisure travel will probably come back sooner. I do not agree with that view in Singapore's case. I think in Singapore's case is there will be initial surge of pent-up demand, and that pent-up demand would be of a business nature. There are only two reasons where people will travel. It's either life or livelihood, and so there's a lot of business that has been waiting to get done, that once the borders restrictions are lifted, that they will come back. And of course there's lives, meaning medical treatments and people wanting to come to Singapore. So I think there will be that initial spurt, but after that, the protocols required for travel, it changes, and then it is also multi-layered, and different countries got different protocols. So it will take a long time to harmonize all these respective protocols to a seamless experience and not make traveling a real hassle, and to make traveling risky. Okay, so I think that will take time, and in the initial phase, people are not going to brave that. And unless you have something that is so compelling, you're not going to be right up on the list of destinations to visit. So what do I mean by that, right? Do you have the cuisine allure and the culture of, say, Kyoto? Do you have monuments that is once in a lifetime, such as the Niagara Falls or the Eiffel Tower? Do you have turquoise oceans that is, you have to experience, like the Maldives? So you have to ask, what does Singapore possess, or what does Singapore offer that is so compelling that you have to brave the inconvenience of travel and the risk of changing regulations or catching something to visit? So this idea of Singapore is safe and it's clean and it's nice, it's not going to be good enough. I'm not going to risk all that just because it is safe, clean, and nice. It's got to be something more alluring. So that's the first part of your question. So the question now then is, so when you say you pivot to quality tourism and you digitize, is that sufficient to make people want to visit your destination? A lot of the digitization is inwardly looking, having robots to deliver water or able to have someone check in through their mobile phone. It's for the convenience and for the to manage the manpower of the establishment. But nobody's going to rush to your destination just because you have got a few robots running around, delivering water, or that you can use your handphone to check in, and there's an app for this or an app for that. That's not going to be the magnet. That's not going to be the gravity to draw in the tourists. It's got to be something more compelling. So there's something more compelling, which then got to be. Do you think this is something that can come from the government saying we should pivot, reimagine, and digitize, and then the private industry magically gets it, and everybody comes together and then evolve and reinvent a brand new destination experience? The answer is it will not happen like that. It can happen in other destinations that has got either wonderful scenery or they have got a culture that is unique. But I think in Singapore, where everything so far has been man-made, it would take political leadership and it will take government to actually set frameworks and policies in place. And private sector has to play ball and has to come together. But I would venture to make this comment that actually when we are talking about the survivability or the viability of tourism for the future, it is not just about the tourism infrastructure that we should be concerned about, but it has got to be a wider appeal of it has got to be a wider appeal of Singapore that has to come about through its own uniqueness. And you cannot create uniqueness by just deciding so. In order to create uniqueness, you have to have a large creative industry. And Singapore is not known to have a large creative base. So having a large creative base is, in order for if you look at destinations like New York, why is New York a popular destination in spite of its infrastructure not being the best and its airport not being the best? Actually, the airport is pretty mediocre if you ask me. But it still is a magnet, is a draw, because there's a lot of creative talent in New York. And Singapore very much like New York because it is a city. In order to be a viable, unique destination draw, has got to first establish a large creative base, and large creative industries, which means that you've got to have industries like in entertainment, in design, in technology, in arts, and in music, and in movies. And unless you have this vibrance of creative industries to then create interesting and creative tourism products, it's just going to be nice, clean, and green, which is not going to be sufficient to bring in 19 million visitors to sustain our 70,000 hotel rooms.
I hear what you're saying, Arthur. So if Singapore is not able to sharpen its leisure offerings, could Singapore not fall back on its financial and business hub status? Because after all, even during the pandemic, the business community is still seeing Singapore as a key part of the Asian economy, and they're still looking to come back to Asia to do business. So perhaps we could then build our future on a much stronger business base.
Well, obviously, our business hub status is of primary importance because that has the economy at large. But in order to talk about the 19 million visitors, how much of that 19 million visitors are BT MICE related? That means they're here because of Singapore being its financial hub. They're here because of the mega events that we have managed to create. It's only about 26%. The larger component, which is about 3/4, it comes from leisure. So when you look at the entire context, even if you manage to grow your 24 to 26% to say a third, you're still far short. So there lies the problem, you see. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm a little concerned. Actually, okay. More than a little concerned.
And you have made that known many times. Okay, so what has Far East Hospitality done to pivot the right way, the way that you said the industry should do?
Well, like in every crisis, right? There is opportunity. Old cliche, but there's a lot of wisdom in that. And we have used this time to do actually 6 things that lead to a seventh. And the 6 things that lead to a seventh is it really gives us time to focus on experience creation. I think experience creation is going to be very important. No longer are we going to be competing based on standards, but we're going to be competing based on uniqueness of experience. So we have been focused on that. So what we've done is different brands create different experiences, and we've been investing time and technology in honing and creating that programming and the experience for our guests. That's one thing. We've expanded into new markets, which we are very thankful for. So during this period, we have gone into Japan in a very big way. We've opened our second hotel in Japan after Tokyo and Yokohama in as many years. So 2 years, opened 2 new hotels in Japan, which is quite significant milestones for us. We're also going into different types of, different streams of business. Now, Far East Hospitality, as you know, is a mid-tier local hotel operator, but it allows us this pandemic to go into the luxury segment with the Barracks and the Clan. We've also now going into the spa business with Oasia Resort Sentosa, so that's very exciting. So we've gone into new businesses, so that's 3. The fourth, I suppose, is this pandemic has given us time and opportunity to actually refurbish some of our more dated products and do some cross-branding. So our hotels are going to be carrying some of our Australian brands like Vibe and Adina. So that's very exciting. And we've managed to put a Quincy in Melbourne. It's given us an opportunity to look at job redesign really seriously and think about how we're going to create jobs that will be able to attract Singaporeans and if you like, review our talent pipeline on how we have been able to, or how we will be able to attract talent to our company. Because, as a local hotel company, we compete with the international players. So usually when you have a bright and young graduate coming into in the industry, they obviously would gravitate towards the big international brands and preferably the luxury brands before they even consider a local black brand. And when they consider a local brand, we may not be even the top of the list. So you can imagine how low down the scale we are, and we want to climb up that scale in terms of our ability to compete for talent, which we have managed to put in programs for and have been quite successful over this period of time. And the last of the 6 initiatives is our ability to look at productivity and sustainability in a far more holistic way. Now, all this 6 culminates to a 7th, and that is we want to use this pandemic to seriously transform the brand perception of Far East Hospitality from a local mid-tier operator to a world-class player in terms of being able to create lifestyle brands. And I think this pandemic has given us that opportunity with, allowing us to hone our established brands like Village and Quincy and Oasia, but also to actually make a mark with the Barracks on Sentosa. It's very highly rated on TripAdvisor, as well as the Clan, which is only open in March, but has been doing extremely well in the markets that we have been able to attract.
All right, last question for you, Arthur. Now, you've mentioned several times that Singapore's tourism future will continue to look very challenging. And we have heard of how Far East Hospitality has gone ahead with partnerships like Art Hotel in Indonesia. So will the company be diverting its growth elsewhere outside of Singapore, where in markets that would be less vulnerable to the situation?
That's an excellent question, and you are absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head. Being in Singapore makes us very vulnerable because Singapore is, 90% of our business is actually dependent on overseas. So what we have to do is to cultivate markets whereby the domestic market is a lot more robust and able to sustain until maybe 4 to 5 years' time, where the international order is re-established and international travel continues. So we're looking at, obviously, seriously in Australia. Other places we're looking at where there is a fairly robust domestic market is in Japan. And we have to consider China because China is a huge and pretty self-contained market. And also to look at how we are going to expand into Europe. Because within Europe, the intra-travel is also rather buoyant and strong. So if you look at this COVID scenario around the world, you can group it as 4 pockets, and out of the 4 pockets, 3 are actually doing quite well, and we are unfortunately in the 4th. And the 4 pockets are the US. If you look at US as a self-contained market, is doing rather well. You look at Europe as a self-contained market, is doing rather well. You look at China as a self-contained market, is doing rather well. And then the 4th is what we term as the rest of the world. And we are in that rest of the world bit. So we can't be in every market. So we have chosen we have to at least, get into the areas whereby there is strong domestic tourism and able to sustain and then hopefully reinvent ourselves and come out of this pandemic in a model that would allow us to stand out and compete head-on with the international players.
Wonderful. It's always wonderful talking to you, Arthur. Thank you so much for your time.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for giving me the afternoon. All the best, Karen.
Thank you so much, Arthur. And to everyone else, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.